Hello, friends. Welcome to Worldbuild with us, the podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. My name is Rob Hilferty, and I'm here with Bishop of Bad Ideas, Chris Prunty.
Oh, I like that.
And our continued special guest, Daniel Quinn. In addition to Daniel Quinn, today we have another interview with Seth Skorkowsky, author of the Vidalcan series, as well as the Black Raven series, and he just came out with a new book called Ashes of Onyx. And we have an interview with him that we're going to cut to fairly soon. Actually, we're just going to cut to it right now. Boop. Hi there. We are joined today by author and RPG veteran Seth Skorkowsky. Seth, thank you very much for joining us here on Worldbuild with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, well, you got the bases covered. I'm a fantasy and horror author. Actually, I just released my newest book earlier this week, so Ashes of Onyx is out. And then I do a YouTube channel. I primarily talk about just tabletop role-playing games in general, scenario reviews, or kind of what I call my philosophy series, which are kind of more comedic takes on some of the stuff that new people are learning and a lot of veterans are all too familiar with.
That's actually kind of how I got to know you and your channel, was through the philosophy series. And, you know, I do love the comedic take on it. And I do love the fact that we have someone who is primarily like a Call of Cthulhu and like a pulp action adventure type fan, as opposed to just every other D&D. You know, not that I have anything wrong with D&D, but I mean, as a fan of Lovecraft, it's nice to see someone who loves Call of Cthulhu with the genuine admiration that you do.
Well, it's, when, I will always love D&D. It was my first love as well. And basically, whenever I finally did kind of stick my head out and start trying out other games, Call of Cthulhu for me was one of those ones where I had heard about it. And once I actually finally sat down and read it, it was very much a kind of a, where the hell has this been my whole life? Like, this is absolutely up my alley. And I'm absolutely in love with that system.
Yeah, just something between the sanity and not just the sanity, but the types of stories. I think it's very atypical considering, you know, you're used to heroism and then you switch to something like Call of Cthulhu and like the tone and of everything basically changes. I think it's really fun, at least in that regard.
I was wondering, so what's your favorite aspect of Call of Cthulhu as it compares to other RPGs?
My favorite aspects of it, see, I love the fact that it is a skill-based system. Those are my jam, where you're not playing a class like you are in D&D or other games, where you are a fighter or a cleric, and then as you gain experience points, you get more powerful and more hit points. With Call of Cthulhu, it's an occupation. You're just a guy, and you have a job, but all of your skills are just kind of based off of what you want to have, and any of them can go up at any time. So it's much freer for us to come up with characters, and instead of, you come up with a character concept and then you have to kind of figure out what class they fall into, unless you just come up with a character and you build it and that's it. And so I love the freedom that it gives, as well as it's always lethal. You know, a street punk with a knife is always threatening to you because you don't suddenly have 800 hit points and there's no way that can hurt you. In Call of Cthulhu, that's always a possibility. So I love that kind of realism to it.
I think that philosophy that you have there really shows up in your book Dameron. I think that, you know, like the fact that, you know, we have these holy hunters and we have, you know, they're wielding these holy weapons and they're highly trained and all that. And yet some of them just get taken out really easily and really quickly by cultists with a machine gun, or cultists with I think you called it a varmint rifle in Dameron and whatnot. I think that I see a lot of bleed through. Do you want to talk about like kind of your process when it comes to Dameron at all?
Well, Dameron was that was a product of a lot of separate ideas finally coming together. I basically had two different ideas for a story, and I finally realized one day that they worked really well together, and that's where that came out. But I don't like the trope where you've got the group of heroes and they all walk away, or they always get that hero wound, you know, that one on the shoulder that never really seems to bother them after they
Right.
initially get hit. So I wanted it to have that feeling of a good war movie where you might find a character that you like, and then they can die the way people do, sometimes just very quickly and without really any warning or anything like that. So I wanted to kind of emulate that kind of war feeling to it.
And that feeling definitely comes across pretty well. I mean, you definitely have characters in there that you don't expect to die, and then all of a sudden you turn around and they're literally face down in the mud with a bullet through them. And you have that as well when it comes to like the Vidalcan, the holy weapons as well, which is also like, oh wow, you just saw 3 of them just get smashed by a giant Oni with a hammer, and it's a matter of, oh yeah, no, shit's real now, got it.
It's
okay,
like carrying all that tension that you get from something like Call of Cthulhu into the narrative storytelling space. That's what's amazing about it.
Daniel, you want to go ahead and ask your craft question, because
yeah.
I know you're waiting to ask it.
So this is my favorite question, especially because I feel like it's rare when you have writers who are also, I mean, it's not rare for us because we encounter a lot of writers who are also role players, but for people who aren't like in the role playing space, they don't have the experience of doing world building for an RPG and then world building for a story. So I always like to ask creators like you, like, what aspects do you take from world building in RPGs that are different than what you might do when you're crafting a story?
When it comes to world building for Dameron, since that was one that takes place in our world, I did want to pull in a tremendous amount of history. I prefer to pull in real aspects of history that are kind of strange or lesser known than have to make it up. I don't mind making stuff up, but if I can work in real, I definitely will. And a lot of my stories pull from that. So most of the monsters that I used in that book, as well as the others, those are real folklore monsters. Very few of them did I come up with on my own. I might have put a new slant on them, but I figure, why reinvent the wheel? I'd prefer it if somebody knows what some of these obscure ones are, they can nod and go, yeah, I know what that is. Or whenever they visit somewhere in Florence or any of the other places they go, if that's a real place, that adds that little bit more credibility to the parts that I made up. It suddenly starts kind of blending the lines of, like, they might think that, well, maybe he didn't make that part up. Maybe that part's real too. So it comes harder to tell where the real and the fantasy are if you do a lot of research with that. I actually have done classes at conventions on world building, at writing conventions, and I always tell them that we have so much freedom when we're writing fiction to do anything we want, but to sell it, you have to know what's really there and blend that in. That way, somebody who knows more about something than you might be able to trick them into thinking that you know what you're talking about.
I really couldn't agree more. One of the things that I draw, I mean, I'm a big history nerd, and one of the things that I always draw inspiration from is real life history. I think that when you recognize that these things can happen and have happened, and when you go out and experience a lot of things in the world, it just adds such depth and realism, like you said, and it helps you sell not just the setting, but the visceral feeling, like, oh, this has happened, and to kind of get into the shoes a little bit more of when you're setting that stage, so to speak.
It's kind of like selling the realism that you would normally be able to do through theatrics and RPGs, but in the writing, you got to do it through some historical verisimilitude.
Seeing how you just finished another book, have you already bought another Hellraiser puzzle box?
Well, I know which one I want. It's the one where it kind of slides apart, and then the star pattern, I think it's called. I haven't done that, and basically right now with I think we've got Brexit coming up in like a week from now.
Wow.
And they're out of England. I might just have to wait to watch to see, what does the exchange rate do, and what is
that's
this
actually a good
for,
point
for exports. So I've kind of been slowly watching because I know exactly which one I want, and my wife has had to admit that I've earned a new box, but They're a weird guilty pleasure. I can't even convince her to watch those movies, but
oh,
I love
what? Yeah, well, most of them anyway.
No.
Oh, come
Speaking of that,
Hellraiser 5 was actually good.
Wow. Yeah,
no,
wow.
don't. Anyhow, there's horror movies that I love, and there's horror movies that I just kind of hold close to my heart. Like, there's movies that I think are better than It, but growing up, It was the movie that got me into horror movies.
The first half of it, yeah.
Oh god, you leave the hey, that's why I like slow build up horror, okay?
Yeah.
But it was more of is Hellraiser also your favorite, or is it just like the one that you cherish because it kind of brought you into horror?
My favorite, just to go with the first one that came to mind, would probably be John Carpenter's The Thing.
Oh, yes, yeah.
That
It's
one,
classic for a reason.
that one is just perfect. It's absolute perfect.
Yeah.
Hellraiser was one of the early horror movies that I saw when I was young, and it was on VHS on a tiny little television, which it looks much better in that format. When you watch it now on super high definition, you can see the cardboard sets, and it looks so bad because you can tell it's a complete shoestring budget. So it's one of those few movies that like you should watch it on VHS on a crappy TV.
With scan lines and everything.
I never thought that might have, like, nostalgia takes you so far, but when I watch them, I'm like, wow, I never noticed these little crap details.
Oh yeah. Well,
I mean,
as you get older,
I get it. It's a product of its time.
But with Hellraiser, I'm also just a huge Clive Barker fan. So I also deeply love the novella that came from. The sequel, The Scarlet Gospels, not so much, but The Hellbound Heart I absolutely loved, as well as many of other Barker's other works. So I watched that and a lot of other Barker movies when I was young, kind of at that impressionable age when I started liking horror. And yeah, I just liked it. It was so different than anything else.
Totally understandable. And Chris actually mentioned that you just came out. I mean, the whole reason this got brought up is because you just finished your new book. And why don't you go ahead and tell us about your new book for those of us who are uninitiated?
Okay. The new novel is Ashes of Onyx. It is about a sorceress named Kate Rossdale who has lost her magic and has become horribly addicted to a drug that gives her a temporary bit of magic. Eventually, she is hired by a man she doesn't trust to do a job, and the payment up front is returned to her magic. And the quest is to travel the multiverse to reach Carcosa to get vengeance to the person who killed all of her friends and robbed everything from her.
That sounds really cool, actually. But like, I already have a million questions that I don't want to ask you.
Oh yeah, that I want to know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have. Yeah, this is so you can tell that you're a storied or actually a veteran world builder, because in your elevator pitch alone, I have so many questions that I know you don't want to get into because you don't want to spoil the rest of the book.
Well,
but man,
I can answer some. You can ask me some. I'm pretty good at skirting.
All right. So first of all, how does the magic work? I mean, first and foremost, I mean, how do you lose your magic and how do you gain it back?
The magic in the world, much of it is very ceremony and gestures. There's a lot of drawing circles. So Kate's most notable ability is she has the ability to draw a circle on the ground with the glyphs that can reach another world, and then they travel through the abyss or through the ether to reach this other world where it has different races and different physics and everything like that. So there's other magic that's done through hand gestures and whatnot. But how she lost her magic and how she gets it back is, the book will have to tell you that one.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was afraid of.
I'm really into like the revenge quest stories, so like it seems like part of this is like redemption for her, but also like getting back at people who took things away from her.
Yeah, there's a little bit of I spit on your grave to it, which I kind of appreciate.
I've been meaning to do a video or a big blog article talking about the difference between sword and sorcery and epic fantasy. And one of the key differences is Sword and Sorcery is very personal based, such as your motivations are revenge, love, greed, those things that all of us have experienced. Well, epic fantasy is usually save the world, save the kingdom, goals that are larger than yourself. And I have always been drawn to Sword and Sorcery motivations more because I can empathize with that. I know what it's like to be angry or feeling a little greedy. So I prefer having those types of motivations.
I mean, very understandable. It's kind of like that divide in comics or sci-fi where there's, golden age compared to new wave or even modern stuff, where, Sword and Sorcery compared to epic fantasy. I'm in complete agreement there. Having something that you can really like gnaw into a character with and understand their motivation so much more is so much more interesting.
There's like a general abstraction that happens, I think, between epic fantasy, like he's saying, and Sword and Sorcery. You get further away from character motivation.
Like hard science fiction and space opera.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I have a question. Speaking of like your own kind of origin story here, when you first came into setting up your channel, and maybe even when you first started putting together your first novels, like what was the journey to get to that moment where you're ready to do?
With books, I wrote for probably, God, I think Dameron came out about 10 years after I decided to seriously start writing. And I was really, really bad at first. And I did actually write one novel and about 75% of its sequel. And I was never able to sell it. I have stacks and stacks of rejections for it. And I did several short stories on the side, and that's where my Black Raven stuff came from. Those were primarily short stories I wrote during those early days, just in between other chapters of the book when I was having writer's block. And finally, kind of in a bout of frustration, I went to a convention that had this big writing workshop that was being headed by a gentleman named Lou Anders, who had just won the Hugo for Best Editor. I figured, if anybody can tell me how to fix my book, it is definitely this guy. And so I spent, 3 days, locked in a room with Lou and about 19 other people. And the weekend ended with him basically saying, like, kid, your book is unsellable, but it taught you how to write. So why don't you just put this in a drawer and write a book that's sellable now that you know how to write? And the next week I started Dameron. So that was actually a very good experience, even though the end result of it was I had to put that really bad book away, just accept it was bad.
Do you ever plan on going back to it? Totally.
The first book, well, let's just say you shouldn't base a novel too much off of a D&D game.
Oh, there you go.
Hey, I think that Dragonlance has something to say about that.
The one success.
Well,
Come on.
There are some exceptions.
Yeah.
I suppose so.
But then the channel, there was no plan. I had meant to do one for a while, and almost spontaneously, I started it one day. I didn't research anything when it came to camera, so I just kind of set up a camera. I didn't know how to edit, so I just talked. And my first, basically any video that I did in my first year, I cringe at so badly. I find them impossible to watch now because the audio is bad, or I hadn't quite figured out how to articulate my thoughts. I also talked too painfully slowly. So like with writing, there's a bit of a learning curve to it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to looking back on this interview a year from now and just being like, oh, I'm such a dumbass. Like, I can't believe this. But no, I can totally understand that. Our own kind of podcast ended up starting with the two of us, me looking to my friends being like, hey, you want to start a podcast? And then basically going from there with rudimentary knowledge of how to edit audio and video, and then just kind of starting. But there's something kind of bold to it, right? There's some kind of excitement to starting something that's entirely yours.
Oh, absolutely. And the truth is, nobody is awesome at this stuff when they first start. And the rest of us, there's a learning curve, and eventually you will look back and you'll forget how much you learned until you revisit that old stuff, and you're like, oh God, why was anybody following me? This is terrible. So
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the fact that we get to talk to people like you and James L. Sutter and stuff like that is just it's a huge deal for us that you're even sitting down with us at all. So it's a huge honor, frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So here's a question that goes back to craft. As we were just talking about, like that first, dead novel that you resurrected as a brand new novel with a new idea. Thinking about your series on RPG philosophy, are there any pieces of advice from there that you would apply to writing itself?
To writing, there's a few things that I do that do go over. One of them does kind of coincidentally hit on world building, and that is the kill your darlings or don't show your homework. A lot of authors, especially when it comes to fantasy, will get so into the world that they've built that the story ends up going on hold so they can show off the world that they built. And while that might be the most fascinating thing in the world to the author, it is really boring fiction. And so when I've talked about that on an RPG philosophy video, that was a lesson that I had really learned through writing is you need to know it's there as the author. That way you can draw from all that, and you know how everything fits together, and you know that it does. But at the same time, you don't need to just blast your audience with it to the point that it's becoming a lecture on some fake history or something like that, because that's where the backdrop starts taking more precedent over the heroes in the story, and that's where the mistake happens.
Yeah, I've always found that when it comes to genre fiction specifically, regardless of what we're looking at, what we're talking about, so many authors tend to waste pages, or actually, it's not even a waste in most cases. In some cases, it might be, but what I'm talking about is more when you're in the real world, we already have all this symbolism that we have and hold meaning for. And then when you're into speculative fiction or when you're into fantasy or what have you, you have to spend the time to tell them, okay, well, this means this. You don't know about the history. You didn't take the 12 years or however many years of education to know and understand what we're talking about here. So let me try and cram it into as much as possible. How do you try and combat that in your own fiction? I mean, how do you kill your own darlings?
Well, there's a couple ways, and a lot of it's through how you approach it. And I think that's the biggest one is in writing. One of the best tools you can do is the new guy trope, where you are explaining to the audience through a character who is the new guy. Harry Potter, for example, was being introduced to the wizarding world. So as people told Harry what in the hell all this stuff was and what's going on, that was in a way telling the audience, and it seemed natural, as that's how that they would do that. That's a lot harder to do if you're doing a story where everyone in the story is familiar with the world and its history and the rules, and now the author has to, kind of explain that to the audience. But the useful idiot or the new guy tropes are super handy to get that information through. The other one isn't necessarily as killing as much, but spreading it out. The big bad part comes when the author kind of just says, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just dump all the information right here in one spot. And after about the second paragraph, your reader's eyes start glazing over because they're like, no, I want to get back to the story. I don't need a history lesson on this made up town. So you have to figure out how to weave in all of that key information naturally without doing, as you know, Bob's, which I guess you're familiar with the trope. As you know, Bob, I'll tell you something that is my way to tell the audience. So you want to kind of throw in these little tidbits about the history of the world or the rules in a way that is bite-sized. Like, by the time the reader just realized you did a little bit of exposition, it's already over. And maybe they didn't even notice it, but you have to kind of get it through smoothly versus almost stopping and pulling out a chart and saying, okay, hold on. Now we're going to tell you the rules of the world. That's boring in both gaming and writing.
Couldn't agree more. Part of me wishes for, and I'm sure that this exists already, but part of me really wants there to be some kind of bold author who just throws in a whole bunch of symbolism and like essentially in media res, and you just like you're not gonna have any context for it. You just kind of have to go by the context clues, almost like a Dark Souls kind of way. Like you just kind of have to piece together the lore surrounding everything. Obviously, that'd be too confusing for a lot of things, but I feel like a skilled writer could kind of get that through.
I haven't read this, but that actually sounds like a description people have told me for the Malazan series. Is it? He pretty much does that. Just throws you into the middle of it, and it's like, don't worry, you'll figure it out. But it doesn't stop at first and just kind of explain it. It's just kind of goes, which a lot of people have said is very off-putting. And then a lot more people say, look, if you give it enough time, it's brilliant. But it is evidently very jarring because that's how they approach it.
Yeah, I've heard very similar things about Malazan, except when you say give it enough time, I often hear that as give it the first 3 books, which is kind of a time commitment for a lot of people.
It's a common thing in sci-fi to do that, to kind of toss you into a world and not really refuse to explain anything, kind of let you acclimate. And it's true, like if you can pull it off over maybe like a chapter, you can get away with it. But then it's like, I don't want to read 3 books before I get there.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree. One of the, allow me to steer this conversation a new way, but one of the areas that I do have a bit of a rant on is with a lot of streaming TV shows now, where
everything is a breadcrumb at the end. Yeah. Or actually, no, I'm sorry. Let me
3 episodes to tell you what the hell is going on. And you're sitting there thinking, it's like, I'm 3 hours in and I don't even know what in the hell is going on or who these people are. That's an entire Lord of the Rings movie, or that's 1.5 Star Wars films. Yeah. Like, if it takes you 3 hours to hook me, then you're failing. So yeah, for me, you've got 1 episode, and after that, it just requires you've either hooked me or enough of my friends have absolutely convinced me to charge onward. But with storytelling, you want to be able to hook them immediately, and then you can explain what the plot is, but you need to be able to get that hook in.
It's like buying time.
Yeah. So speaking of hooks and storytelling, I think that you can transition that kind of storytelling to role playing for sure. Like, what are some of the best ways for you to convey world building through role play and also get people interested in the plot? I mean, I know that you have videos on hooks and everything like that, but what do you think?
One of the best ones is, I talked about, the author or the game master needs to know or should know all the world behind the scenes, even though they don't have to show it all at the same time, or maybe not show all of it ever, is give the illusion that you do, even if you don't. Mm-hmm. So there is a kind of an art to making it look like there is a much larger world going on, even if all you know is the little dinky town they're in and maybe about what's around it for 1 mile in every direction. If you can make it look like you know what's going on out there in the wider world, and then you can stick to being consistent to it. That's the other big key. Whenever you improvise something, saying like, "Oh yeah, this is how the politics are there," you need to remember that. That way, when it comes up again later, they're like, "I remember when I heard that before. He's genius. He has so many notes on this," and you're quickly jotting down the answer. But you need to give the illusion that there is a scope there. But as far as hooks, any hook will do. As far as just get a motivation. Raiders of the Lost Ark is one I usually use for the example here. In the very beginning, it hooks you right away. You don't really even know who in the hell Indiana Jones is, but he's menacing, and he's got this whip and it's cool. And then later on, they introduce the concept of now we're going to chase the Ark and try to defeat the Nazis. But you already love the character up front, and that's enough to keep you going until we then get to the bigger hook, and then we're off on the story and on the adventure.
What I love about that Indiana Jones example in particular is not only do you get his strengths, he's an adventurer, but he's cunning and he's fast and kind of a badass, but you also get a greater sense of his weaknesses and kind of, like the snakes thing gets brought up almost immediately. And I think that to get the quirk to go along with, he's not just a badass, he's also a human. Like I think that's probably one of the more brilliant parts of cinema is when you get, it's such a distilled moment of the character, which is a stark contrast to the third film where it's a matter of, oh, well, we see the origin, all of them within a 5-minute period, from the hat to the whip to the snakes. It feels kind of hokey compared.
Oh, it does. Well, with Indiana Jones, he's to me one of the perfect fictional heroes, because he's not perfect. He jumps across the chasm and he can't make it. So he grabs onto the vine. He kind of gives this kind of sigh, and then it starts pulling off. So there's a lot of clumsiness to him. He's obviously very smart. That's his biggest attribute. But he's kind of clumsy. He's got some phobias. He's kind of a jerk, and he's not absolutely flawless. And one of the mistakes that a lot of authors will make is they will make their characters too perfect. And what makes Indiana Jones great is the fact that he is flawed, but you still love him, and you find enjoyment in those flaws. So I think that's also just a perfect movie, just absolutely flawless, perfect.
Couldn't agree more. Right up there with like The Mummy with Brendan Fraser.
Oh my God, I love that movie so.
Thank you. Thank
much.
you.
I saw that movie in theaters 3 or 4 times, and I have owned it on every format that it's come out on.
It's so good. I saw it in a drive-in, in a double feature, the first time I ever saw it, and it's still amazing. I mean, the CG obviously doesn't hold up, but that sense of adventure, that's like the last great adventure movie to come out in a very, very long time. No, I'm not talking about action, because there's so many good action movies. Adventure, where there's like a sense of like together, exploration, and you're kind of, and wonder is another important thing as well. Yeah.
We could fanboy over this movie for the next 2 hours.
We got time. Look, I can switch formats of this podcast whenever I want. I will gladly talk about this movie.
Love it. But Brendan Fraser has a lot of those same aspects. He's kind of clumsy. He's kind of goofy. He's kind of clueless. Benny is just solid gold. But he owns the camera every time he's on it, which is
scene stealer every time.
Just flawless. Everything on the casting of that movie was perfect. I can fanboy over the
I'm so glad that I have someone to fanboy with, because man, that the first one in particular, it drops off in quality as they go, obviously. But man, that movie is still amazing.
The second one.
The second one's fine. The second one's totally fine.
No, it's not. No.
Wow.
The 1 2 is the greatest cinematic disappointment I have ever experienced. I went to go see that in theaters because I loved the first one so much. It came out and I went to see it, and I felt so betrayed and so let down. I've never forgiven it.
That's like me when I went and saw V for Vendetta in the theaters, and I drove home the maddest I have ever been, just like screaming and blowing red lights. And
there's no rage like fanboy rage.
Right? Especially when there's disappointment. I think that's really where fanboy rage stems from, is disappointment. It's like, I love this thing so much and you hurt it, like it's kind of like a father to, that's a bit much, obviously.
Wow.
I know. Melodramatic here. It's okay.
Speaking of melodrama, I had a question for you involving your Ed Lord video, which is my favorite video, hands down. So, because we were talking about characters like Indiana Jones and what makes a good tropey kind of hero. When you think of tropes out there, what would you do in role playing with the tropes that you're handling? What spin do you put on your tropes in writing to make them more interesting? What's your technique there?
Tropes to use for writing?
Well, since kind of in role playing, you tend to turn to tropes to get a point across quickly. In writing, are there ways that you can use kind of those skills for role playing to spin a trope, just like we did with Indiana Jones?
Well, with role play, there's a lot of people that try to, I guess, hide from tropes in a role-playing game, and I'm more inclined to run toward them. I think part of the reason that we do these games is so we can, have these tropes. So while in writing, it's like, well, you want to avoid it, or you want to always put like a very big spin on it or a new take. With role-playing, I'm like, nah, just run right at that thing. Don't give me a carbon copy of an existing character, but you can rip off all the tropes you want. Knock yourself out. Just because I think that is part of the appeal of the games. So with gaming, though, it's kind of this what I just said with Indiana Jones. Like I love some good flaws. I never want them debilitating. I've got one player. We've been playing together 21 years this month now, and he is what I call a flaws addict. And it is amazing what sort of flaw he will give his character. And the whole time I'm like, how did you think this would be playable?
What's an example?
And it's just incredible how much he will come up. He'll really go out of his way to come up with an elaborate flaw. And I'm usually just sitting there going, you took a perfectly good character and what did you do to this thing? He's made it work a few good times. And when it's worked, it's spectacular, but that hit to miss ratio is pretty severe. So it is, he's made a hit like 3 times in 21 years, and there's been a lot of misses.
So I was going to say, sometimes the character who adds like a little bit of chaos, like really, really helps kind of change the story and adds a little bit, like it's the spice, right? Like where everyone's playing, like, oh, I got the bread, which is the fighter. I got the meat, which is the cleric. And, and then all of a sudden somebody comes in. It's like, oh, I'm the cayenne pepper. I'm this guy. But I think what you might be describing is a little bit different. It's like, oh yeah, I'm the toothpaste, like on the sandwich. Yeah.
That's it. The toothpaste
instigator
is what we will call that. I could never do a video on this because it's very difficult to get the point across outside of a conversational setting. I love the chaos factor of a player. When you play with certain people a very long time and they're very seasoned, they have a tendency to very carefully think through everything they do, and it's just about impossible to get them. So I also love having that one player that's just, I don't know, just a little impatient or just a little crazy. And so when they're in the room and they know the door is trapped or they can't figure out the other way out, that one player, it's like, damn it, I'm just going to open the door. And it's like, oh, thank you. You've now made this game fun, because these super slow, painfully slow, meticulous players are not letting the boulder chase them.
Yes. Thank you.
So sometimes I do want that. And it's a player I'll usually gripe about 90% of the time, but 10%, it's just like, thank you. Thank you for being my chaos. I needed that so bad. So I do love to have it, because it can really make the game a lot more fun when you just have that one player that either really jumps on a bad idea or just acts without thinking every once in a while.
I would agree completely.
He is my chaos player oftentimes.
But I also believe that sometimes you have not killed me just because it's just like, we spent 20 minutes at that door. It wasn't trapped. There was just someone on the other side waiting for you to come in. Just open the damn door.
Perfect example of that, actually. I gave them, it was a level 1 game, and I told them, like, hey, we're going to have an intro session where it's level 1, and then we're going to skip to 15th level because you guys have never played an epic game. And I wanted to do that. And so I presented them game 1, session 1 with, you have several tons of gold and magic items that you have to move from this location in the jungle back home. What do you do? And I swear to you, most of them were like, it's a trap. I don't know how it's a trap, but it's a trap. I'm not touching it. And I'm like,
we're going to drown in gold.
No, the fun part is getting the gold back. Yeah. That was the whole point of the adventure. Exactly. And it's just like, I can't just do it. Come on, just pull the gold out, please. They were terrified.
So that's part of the problem when you're playing with some seasoned players. They don't trust anything.
Poke it with a stick, Don't trust that person. Guess what? I want to know whether they're lying every time they speak.
Oh god, yeah.
We did that too. I remember that.
Yeah. How do you normally like get out of that rhythm? How do you normally break people of, that kind of analysis paralysis, or like, if you're seasoned, like cause panic, cause decisions to happen? What's your go-to for that?
Well, I've had a few that I've used. With my channel, I'm really known for doing a lot of scenario, like module reviews. And so I guess people kind of falsely assume that most of my games are modules, because I've got a lot of them, which is also accumulated off almost 30 years now. But when I started playing with my current group, which is two of them, we just had our 21st anniversary. Those first 14 years or so, I never used a module. So they learned how to read me, even if they didn't know. They knew when this is what Seth would do here. They would know how to beat my little tricks, or they would know when I'm setting them up for something. And then I'd pull out a module, which was written by somebody else. And man, that screwed with them, because it's not necessarily the way I would have done it, but I was going to follow the module. And that's when all of a sudden they could trust nothing. Their instincts were wrong. The other one is we do a lot of theme games, or we'll do a change of systems altogether to really shake things up. I can never stress how valuable that was for us when we started playing Cyberpunk was our first big change. And the dynamic of everybody, you've got that one player who always plays this one way. When you throw them in a completely different setting and a completely different game mechanic, it's kind of like shuffling the deck. They might come up the same, but sometimes it's totally different, and they play differently. And I am playing differently as the game master. So that was a wonderful way to, I guess, kind of shake off a lot of bad or tired habits from both sides of the screen.
Seth, I have to say that your segue into our world building jam session, where we randomize everything, couldn't have been any more perfect than that. It's kind of like a reshuffling of our own ideas. And we're going to get right into that, unless you have something else you want to talk about real quick.
No, let's do it.
Cool.
Sweet.
All right. So the way that this works is we're going to roll three things. There's the genre, the subject, and the theme. The genre can be science fiction, fantasy, horror, modern day, romance, or we can roll twice and combine two. Then there's the subject, which is an item, a monster, a place, a historical figure, an event, or again, roll twice and combine two. And then we stick with a theme, which is madness, sacrifice, love, metamorphosis, pride and honor, the unspeakable, triumph, and hope. Then, once we've got that down, we throw in a twist. And there's currently 20 of those, and I'm not going to read them all out loud. And we are just going to dive right into that.
Okay, go for it.
Oh, yeah, I added some.
All right, so this is going to be for the genre. We have horror. How appropriate, all things considered.
These dice are stacked.
Next, I look. I have witnesses. I promise.
I was going to tell you to lie and put 3, but that worked out.
yeah. This is why we don't do video. Next, we got the subject.
It's behind the screen. It's fine.
We've got a historical figure. All right, and now we go for our theme. Where is my D8? There we go. All right, and the theme is madness. Okay.
Of course.
All right, come on.
Now
No.
it's like faded.
All right.
What is Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter?
I saw that movie and I liked it, and I'm not ashamed.
That's fine.
Daniel,
No.
as someone who hates Pacific Rim, I want to reach over and slap you so bad right now. All right, Seth, we've got a horror genre with a historical figure whose theme is surrounded in madness. Why don't you go ahead and get us started, unless you want to stick with Abe Lincoln Vampire Hunter.
No.
I'm cool with that too.
I've never seen or read it, but man, a historical figure. Well, let's see.
So to clarify here, a historical figure in a setting of our own making. So it can just be an important person, not necessarily George Washington fighting the Loch Ness
It could be
Monster.
fantasy Nero or anything.
Well, we're looking for horror here.
That is horrifying. Thousands of people died.
The difference between horror and fantasy is the lighting. It really is. So I guess we should figure out who our historical figure is first, right?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
What direction did you want to go in?
Man, I don't know. Like I kind of want to go further out, but I at least want to have somebody that I know something about, somebody I can picture in a horror situation. Like Teddy Roosevelt, I always gravitate to, but I can never picture that man being afraid.
Let's make it
So
happen.
I actually have a Teddy Roosevelt shirt, and I can agree that face is not afraid of anything. Oh, is that where we want to go? Do you want to go with like?
I think you should do it.
What makes Teddy scared?
What
Is that the direction that we want to go in?
What do you think?
Okay.
Yeah,
1800s Delta Green.
the Rough Riders were the original Delta Green, of course. It makes total sense.
Ooh, that's a good one. What did they find when they went to Cuba? Ooh.
Yeah. What did, or more importantly, what did Spain bring over to help kind of keep the colonists down, or the colonies down?
Oh, damn, this thing is writing itself. This is awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Teddy Roosevelt.
That mustache.
Death took him in his sleep because he couldn't take him awake.
Now we could go real silly and real cheesy and just go with like some kind of a bull moose demon, but I'd prefer not to if we could help it.
Well, if you go through the concept of Spain brought something to keep the colonists in line, and then Teddy Roosevelt had to face against that. The next thing is it a monster or an item of power?
Remember that we have the theme of madness as well. We want to keep that in mind.
I like item of power because it usually depends on the wielder of the thing. You know how it causes its problem.
Yeah, as someone who's been playing through Blasphemous and digging all of the weird arcane Catholic mythology, I'm totally down with an item of power as well.
Okay, I think it should be something that attacks you in your sleep because of Teddy. So
yeah.
So something,
R.I.P. a real one, Teddy Roosevelt. Absolutely.
So something of shadow, something of night, something that gets you while you're asleep.
What if it's something that takes both forms? It is an item that becomes a monster.
Almost like a mimic or a sentient item of some kind?
You want to handle it as something that gets you in your sleep.
I'm so glad we have post-production to edit all this part out, but still.
Hey, just spitballing ideas is fun. I love this part.
I know this is our third time doing it, and it's fun every single time. It's like
Teddy fear?
The only thing I can think
fear
of that
itself. Oh no, that's
no.
FDR. Sorry,
Teddy
FDR.
fearing reverting back to what he was before he forced himself to work out to perfection.
Yeah, like a nobody.
Yeah.
No, when he had asthma before he spent time in Montana.
All of that being stripped, all his work being undone.
We can work with that. So what did the Spaniards have would be similar, that would invoke that kind of fear?
Okay. So his biggest fear is reverting back to the little weakling he was. God, Teddy Roosevelt was a badass. This kind of small, mustacheless, asthmatic kid. So I guess kind of showing him his madness was the realization that no matter how hard he tries, he is still that weak person that he spent his life trying to run from. So Teddy Roosevelt's madness is caused, let's say, by he's being basically followed. Like It Follows, but it's a very small, young, asthmatic Teddy Roosevelt.
It's got to be if we're doing an item, it's going to be a mirror then, right? So it's an actual dark reflection of all of his fears, or is that a little bit too tropey?
Well, if he says
or are we running towards the trope?
Well, if it's like the It Follows thing, maybe it came out of the mirror and now it's like a doppelganger of Teddy that's this child version of
I don't want it to be exactly like It Follows, because that's disturbing to picture in my mind.
Oh God, yeah.
What about the mirror? Let's say is in a pool of fluid, like a goblet or a bowl, and the form that it takes, kind of following that water theme, is kind of a mist. that moves along the ground and comes out of the water, and that's where little Timmy Asthmatic Roosevelt comes out of, as this kind of a misty form in the night.
Oh, that's really great.
Now, as it was coming from Spain, and I think we were leaning a little bit on to it being of Christian of origin.
Sure.
I was picturing maybe part of it is corrupted humility.
Oh,
because it is making him into his weaker self as he was young,
Proud.
and he is an incredibly proud person.
Yeah.
Every right to be.
And if we're doing like kind of a mist, why not have it be like a holy censer that's been corrupted or something like that? So
You just got to that stage with the big one in the background.
okay, we're gonna go ahead and switch over to the throw in a twist. I feel like we've got a solid concept, so I feel like we're gonna switch over.
Okay.
All right, let's see what we got. All right, so so now we have to kill or revive a major character.
You can't kill Teddy. You just can't die.
No. You have Teddy beat his asthmatic self
No.
to death. No,
It's the opposite. It's the opposite. Weak Teddy actually. Weak Teddy actually kills Teddy Roosevelt, and no, from then on we have a dark doppelganger.
Oh, he takes
Evil
over.
Teddy,
Oh
yeah,
my God.
evil Teddy
He grows up
Roosevelt.
really quickly. Yeah.
Oh, so like the end, evil Teddy Roosevelt peels off Teddy Roosevelt's face and puts it on and walks into the White
Or
House.
just-
turns to the camera, his eyes glow.
That's the horror component. That is the horror.
Well, I mean,
Teddy we knew and loved was a doppelganger.
the whole time.
Oh,
And then you can go back and be like, Teddy Roosevelt before this moment was actually just a horrible person. And there's so much rich. Okay, all right, that's fun. Seth, what else do you? What other options do you have? Besides, who else could we revive or kill that we can kind of throw in here with Dark Teddy?
Oh, okay. Well,
did he run against Garfield? Not the cat.
see, when did he die versus Tesla?
Oh, we gonna bring Tesla? Yes. Please let's do it if it's possible.
I mean, if you
Tesla, I think,
ever
was
go into super science and weird,
1930s?
Tesla is like a gold mine.
Oh yeah, him and Edison
Oh my god.
just fighting wizards and
Yeah. See, I'm trying to think what's great because
Wizard
I mean,
Mellow?
Teddy Roosevelt, Dark Teddy. I mean, he mostly punched out Moose, and I mean, he got shot at one point. Somebody knew the truth and shot him, and he still delivered a speech with his dark, misty blood pouring out the whole time.
Yeah.
But
So is that why Teddy got into politics and all? Because he was like corrupted, and then decided to stick with it afterwards. Like, well, I'm already halfway here. Might as well.
that's as plausible of an explanation as I've ever heard. So
And that's when the shadow government was formed by Teddy Roosevelt.
I mean, if we're doing like a weird kind.
It's horror. You can't end happy, guys.
Yeah.
You can't end happy.
Yeah.
Teddy can't actually win, So it makes sense.
So basically, we've got our Delta Green organization was the shadow government, or I guess the resistance, completely designed to assassinate Dark Teddy.
Yes. And that turned against him because in the end, they end up serving the evil Dark Teddy.
And you know what? I'm fine with that being headed by Nikola Tesla.
All right. No. So Teddy died in 1919, and Tesla died in 1943.
Which means Tesla wins.
Oh, poor Tesla.
Point for
He
Tesla.
can be in the sequel. It's fine. He can win the sequel. You gotta stop Dark Teddy. Not stop him. You gotta take over the Shadow Belt.
Okay.
I want to see a made-for-sci-fi movie called The Return of Teddy Roosevelt now that follows this plot.
Oh
Just-
man.
just Dark Teddy.
Yeah, I mean, if you want another puzzle box, there's your idea right there.
No, just pitch it to sci-fi. They'll do it.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
the
they're
Vampire Hunter book, it did well.
That's true.
don't get me started. Okay, all right, Seth. I think that's going to wrap it up for the
That was a lot of
Worldbuild
fun.
Jam. That was a lot of fun. I'm gonna ask you some real quick questions as I do at the end of every interview.
If it is soup.
My wife wants to know: is cereal a soup?
Yes.
All right.
That was definitive.
What RPGs have you been playing recently?
Traveler and Call of Cthulhu.
Hey, there we go. And for one more, who would you like to plug? That's not you.
Who would I like to plug? That's not me. Damn, I'm so busy thinking about myself all the time. Guess I could help that one.
Yeah, I mean, you can put yourself in logic.
Yeah.
Oh no, that comes later.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, that comes later.
Actually, who I'd love to plug is it is another author friend of mine who I've been trying to talk into doing a YouTube channel for some time. His name is Clay Sanger. And Clay is a fantastic author who does very occulty gangland fiction. His novel that's out is just a piece of brilliance. It's like Sons of Anarchy meets Constantine. So Clay Sanger, remarkably talented and doesn't believe in himself enough. So I would like to plug him because he is really good and doesn't know it.
And what's the name of that book that he just came out with?
It is called
Sons of
Innsville.
Anarchy one. Ennsville. All right. Gentlemen, do you have any other questions, quick questions for Seth Skorkowsky before we move on?
Sure. What was your favorite character's name that you played in all of RPG history?
Oh, that's a good one.
My favorite character from any RPG, his name was Carl Preston Smith, and he was from a cyberpunk game, and he was ridiculously narcissistic, and he would do a lot of disguises all the time. And all of his disguises had the initial CPS like his, and he was very much modeled after Christian Bale in American Psycho.
Oh, that's perfect. Okay.
And he quoted Teddy Roosevelt all the time, oddly enough. That's a weird coincidence. I've only done that once, and it was him.
So when learning another system, you typically said that you would fight with create a character and fight another person.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we do our combat practice.
Who would win more often than not? And did you keep a score? Follow-up, did you keep a score?
Okay. So, yeah, my buddy, Jesse, who's the one that I played with forever, that is sometimes kind of the wild card and just loves crippling his characters.
Have you just been beating up asthmatics for 21 years?
He, during fight practice, we're both competent characters. That man thinks so sideways that it is impossible to gauge what he is ever going to do. So whenever we do fight practice, if the system has like a really good melee combat system and like normally it would be like a gun system, he will always win because he will pull out some obscure rule over breaking holds, disarming, choking me out. And I'm busy just trying to figure out how to punch him. So yeah, he usually wins during the melee portion and I dominate him during the ranged portion.
Excellent. That's great. All right. Seth Skorkowsky, thank you so much for joining us on Worldbuild with us. You have the last 2 minutes to go ahead and plug away at all your pluggables. Go ahead.
I'm suddenly caught off guard. My pluggables?
Yeah, I mean, you got a new book that just came out. I mean, come on, what else you got going on?
Well, what else have I got going on? I am doing Total Con later this month, which will be up in Massachusetts. I'm a guest of honor there, and I will actually
We're Boston based. Yeah, that's awesome.
And then later this year, I will be at Gen Con. I'm coming with a writer symposium. So I'm coming on the writer side of things again. And then SpaCon, I just confirmed that one. That'll be in Arkansas. SoonerCon in Oklahoma. Those will be, I guess, my big kind of appearances throughout the year. And as far as, I guess, my own books, I have my Valdekin series, which is a 4 separate novels of urban fantasy monster hunting. My Black Raven series, which are all pulpy sword and sorcery short stories. And then, of course, Ashes of Onyx, which is my new baby. Very, very broken hero in that one. I love her.
Very excited to read that one. All right, Seth, thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll see you at TotalCon, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm glad.
Thank you.
And that'll do it for that episode with Seth Skorkowsky. I cannot tell you how excited I am to have someone who's so on board with their love of the Mummy like I am. Honestly, that was probably one of my favorite things besides... Well, no, it was my favorite thing. It was being able to talk. Yeah, bonding over the Mummy and Brendan Fraser.
Or Teddy Roosevelt? Yeah.
Is that your favorite part,
I
Daniel?
think so. I think the world building jam we did that resulted in a Teddy Roosevelt
Yeah, that's
driven
fair.
story.
Ted-
And his
Ted-
evil alter ego.
Yeah, evil Teddy Roosevelt and everything.
I still can't get It Follows Teddy Roosevelt out of my head.
Let it
and
consume you.
It will haunt me in my dreams.
Is it, I mean,
Just like the movie, yes.
Hold on. To be fair, Teddy Roosevelt's pretty fuckable on the list of American presidents.
We said
He's
it
top
was his
10.
emaciated asthmatic child self.
The evil
Okay,
version.
no, but I'm talking about regular bull moose, wink, Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah, but they're
He's-
both doing it.
Oh, no.
That's the worst part of it.
Okay, yes, but I'm saying like the Teddy Roosevelt that I have on my T-shirt, Teddy Roosevelt. That Teddy
Is
Roosevelt.
that the one riding a dinosaur?
Yeah.
No,
Oh, okay.
no,
What?
it's the black and white portrait one that I have.
Wait, you have a different president riding a dinosaur?
He's not riding a dinosaur at all. It's just his face.
I just put him on a dinosaur like subconsciously. I don't
Yeah.
know why.
He
Yeah.
deserves it. Yeah. No, but Teddy Roosevelt's awesome. Teddy Roosevelt's again also top 10 fuckable presidents for sure.
Is Obama up there?
Oh yeah,
course.
Come on,
Yeah,
look at his
right.
live little body.
Van Buren?
Of course. Yeah.
Look at those chops.
The chops. Yeah, okay, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. I'd say Teddy's up there for sure.
Yeah.
Obama's got to be up there.
Yeah.
100%.
Not Nixon, I assume.
Oh God, look at those jowls and tell me he's at all fuckable. Yeah.
I just
get
want you
outta
to make
here.
the noise.
How did you know I would make the
You
noise?
make the noise.
I'd probably say Washington, despite his gross,
The wooden
decaying teeth. Yeah, and the slavery. That's
Yeah,
definitely.
that's a
Yeah,
problem.
you just fell out of top 10.
Oh,
there.
yeah, all the slavery ones are problems.
Yeah, that's
Said it
true.
before.
Oh, JFK.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
he's like
yeah.
a dreamboat.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. JFK is definitely up there.
LBJ.
No, just because he has a big dick. Just
Whoa,
like,
whoa,
come on.
whoa, whoa, whoa.
He called it Jumbo or Dumbo or whatever.
did.
Yeah, he would
no,
whip it out on people.
He would purposely
Oh
show
my
people his dick, I
God.
believe.
Okay,
Oh
hold
my
on.
God.
Oh yeah, as an intimidation tactic, he was terrible.
Jesus.
Although, if it's Clancy Brown as depicted in The Crown, then we can talk about it. But it's not. It's not Clancy Brown. I love Clancy Brown.
This was about world building, not
yeah,
Yeah.
but also presidents. Chris, what was your favorite part of our interview with Seth Skorkowsky?
I just like talking about horror movies and how they influence you and how you grew up with them.
Yeah, that was fun as well.
And yeah, I liked picking his brain about Hellraiser and everything because, like, it's not my favorite movie, but it is the one that I hold closest to my heart.
Yeah, I kind of feel that way about certain horror movies as well. Like there are certain movies that like I know this is very clearly not the best horror movie or the best movie I've ever seen, but it's like The Mummy. It just has a special place in my heart.
He
of
also
like,
mentioned
man,
the Thing that he mentioned.
Yeah.
the thing is
Yeah.
undoubtedly one
Uh-huh.
of the best horror movies of all time. It's so fucking good.
Yeah.
Every time I'm delayed on the red line, though, I still think of Midnight Meat Train.
Yeah.
Clive Barker.
Midnight
Yeah.
Meat Train.
Yeah. Watch it. Next
Not-
time you're
I gotta
stuck on
watch
the red
this.
line, just watch it.
Not a great
Makes it better.
movie though.
No, not a great movie.
Not a great movie at
okay,
all.
yeah. Listen to a reading of it.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, I think that'll about wrap it up. If you want to go ahead and send us your top 10 list of fuckable presidents, go ahead and email us at worldbuildwithus@gmail.com.
Doesn't have to be American.
Oh, yeah,
That's
no.
true. Open it up.
Yeah, I mean, MPs, prime ministers, like if you got like a series of kings or
Yeah.
whatever, please, I mean, send us your list by all means. If you don't want to email us, you can always send us a DM at Let's World Build on Twitter and follow us there for all sorts of fun nonsense and whatnot. And until next time, I mean, I'm just going to say it. We love you very much and have a good week.